You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
This week's Lawn Order Marathon winner is Sarah Deemer of Waterford, Pennsylvania. Sarah will receive a marathon decal showing she watched 26.2 hours of her favorite crime show. To be next week's winner, sign up at lawandorderpodcast.com.
I'm Kevin Flynn with Rebecca Lavoie and Lara Bricker, and these are their stories. Welcome to These Are Their Stories, the podcast about network TV's most enduring crime franchise and the real-life cases that inspired their shows. I'm Kevin Flynn. Each podcast will break down an episode from either Criminal Intent, SVU, or Original Recipe. And today we're looking at Law & Order, Season 11, Episode 2, Turnstile Justice.
You say the one and only person responsible for Steph getting killed is this lunatic? You put a line through it on your list, and then you pat yourselves on the back?
Mr. Donatelli, I understand you're upset, but this isn't the time or the place to address these things.
Tell me what is the time and place, and I'll be there.
Joining me to do just that is true crime author and the host of Crime Writers On and Mom and Dad Are Fighting from Slate, Rebecca Lavoie. Hello, Rebecca.
Kevin, I've got my HMO card, and I'm reporting for duty.
All right. Rounding out our panel is our special guest, also from the Crime Writers On podcast.
Digging deep this week.
It's Lara Bricker. Hello, Lara.
Good day, Kevin.
So, Lara, how did you get into podcasting?
How did I get into podcasting? I think that you, Kevin, may have emailed me and said, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And I'm like, what's that?
And after I Googled podcast.
Yeah, I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And that was actually 4 years ago now, which is crazy to me that we have been doing our Crime Writers On podcast for 4 years.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
It really is.
I don't want to get Oprah on the couch right now, but I've never asked you, do you enjoy doing this?
Well, Kevin, it has changed my life. Yes.
Now, Lara, you've become famous for your rage walks.
I have.
Explain how that came about for us.
Well, I have to say, and I might be rage walking after this episode that we're talking about today. So, I have a background in criminal justice. I worked as a defense investigator for the public defender system for a number of years. And I have a little bit of a trigger when it comes to injustices and people being taken advantage of. And no kidding, no shit. So my new outlet is walking, and I have a new place. The local YMCA actually has one of those speed punching bags in the corner of their track. So if I really get enraged, I can just pummel on that.
The thing that looks like one testicle hanging?
Yeah, pretty much. So, when I get like super, super enraged, I can just take a little break, get my rage out, and start walking again. It's been a very good outlet for me.
Now, I know you're a big fan of British crime dramas of all stripes. You've enjoyed the Scandinavian crime dramas. How is your relationship with Law & Order, the quintessential American crime drama?
Well, it's actually kind of funny you should ask me this, Kevin, because I'm somebody who has always had this show sort of on in the background when I'm doing things in my house.
Not just you.
And I just sort of watch it. I don't really know who anybody is, but I somehow find myself strangely getting sucked into it whenever I turn on the TV, and it always seems to be on. 24 hours a day. So, I think I've moved on now. I'm definitely more in the British crime drama camp, but I do still love some Law & Order. It's sort of soothing to go back to that.
Even though she doesn't know who any of the characters are or what their jobs are.
But that's the thing is you don't actually need to know episode to episode.
You're right. It's
There's not a
plug and play.
continuing storyline. It's each episode is encapsulated. So you just have to kind of remember people's names. And getting to that, Lara...
Favorite Law & Order detective team.
Of all the franchises, can you name two detectives?
Or just tell us what they look like.
Well, I can't. So I looked it up because I'm going to tell you that my favorite detective is Mariska Hargitay because I like her. Hey, how do you say her name?
Hargitay.
Mariska Hargitay.
Okay, let me say. Whatever her name is. You know what? I'm going to say it's the lady with the hairstyle that I always want and that will never work on my hair. because my hair is too curvy and wavy, and I'm like, I really like her hair.
Wait a minute, she's been on 20 seasons and has had 19 different hairstyles.
So which one?
So which
I like
one?
the short hair. I like the short hairstyle. And she has that hot partner who I think was also in something else we recently watched. Was he in like The Night Of or something? Anyway, he's super good looking. So, yes.
Mariska Haggerty, I'm sure, is very thrilled to hear that she's top of your
Yeah.
list. Love it.
Whatever her name is, the hair chick.
Laura, who's your favorite prosecutorial team?
Favorite Law and Order District Attorney Prosecutorial Team.
Oh, dear God. I'm going to go with Sam Waterston from this episode because, again, I know who he is, and he happens to be my neighbor across the street. His daughter is like her childhood best friend. So I feel a little bit invested, I know, in watching him and his attractive little counterpart in this week's episode.
Yeah. Angie Harmon, a.k.a. Abby Carmichael.
Carmichael sounds very official.
Who is my favorite. She's actually my favorite co-prosecutor along with Jack McCoy.
That's great. Well, we don't want Laura's bad pick getting back to her neighbor.
It's true.
Because it might get all the way back to Sam Waterston if it's wrong.
Oh, that's good. No. We've talked about it. She said she'll let me know if he's ever in town. I'm like, all right.
And
then I'll let Rebecca know as well. Yes.
We'll be down with a tape recorder in a minute. All right, now let's look at the first half of this episode, Law & Order Season 11, Episode 2, Turnstile Justice. Don't sleep in the subway, darling. Oh, you're dead on a bench? My fault. Let's call Briscoe and Green.
No one's filed a report with missing persons fitting her description.
Which could mean she was from out of town.
Oh, that's just what we need. Female tourist beaten to death on the subway.
She was dressed more like a businesswoman than a tourist.
The unidentified woman's head was bashed in somehow. The detectives work backwards from the turnstile to the newsstand to the diner where she gets her coffee to the photo shop where she gets the photos of her children. And then there's a number 6 in the background of the apartment. What? So they learned the woman is Stephanie Donatelli. Her distraught ex-husband says she always wore certain family heirlooms like a gold cross and a swatch.
Winnie the Pooh.
They catch a break when 2 women are spotted using the victim's American Express card at a movie theater. They got the card from her boyfriend who bought it off a homeless guy who took all of Stephanie's valuables. He says some crazy black guy came up behind Stephanie and dropped a paving stone on her head, leaving only with her eyeglasses. Briscoe and Green ask a patrolman if they know any crazy black guy in the New York City subway system ever. They point him to Ryan Gallant's flophouse where the delusional man is arrested. Okay, so a woman dead on the bench at the subway station.
Yep.
These detectives are put out?
These detectives are like...
DOA on a subway platform.
Maybe it's a person of great renown.
Maybe they thought we didn't have anything else to do.
Why do they even call us? I'm like, because there's a dead person and you're homicide detectives? Like, what is the matter with you? And then they have like this like really weird like Briscoe quip there where Green says something like, oh...
Well dressed, nails done. She puts in an honest day's work and waits for the downtown local to go home.
Yeah, she caught the express.
Looks like she caught the express. And I'm like, first of all, how did you know she was waiting for the local? That seems awfully specific for people who don't care about killings in the subway system.
Oh, it just sets up the quip. Come on. Go with it. So they learned their victim always had a cup of coffee. So where do they go? A diner across the street.
Another person I know gone. And this one had kids.
How do you know that?
Every other week she's in here with new pictures that she just picked up from next door.
And apparently that's where she gets her cup of coffee to go. Every day. It's the year 2000. And she's going into a little greasy spoon to get a cup of coffee to go.
Whatever works. What I found more suspicious about that scene was like, why is she showing these diner people pictures of her kids all the time? Like,
they don't fucking care.
Like, what are you, like, inviting pedophiles to come find your kids? I'm like, what is this? That seemed very odd to me. Very suspect.
All of this backwards investigation stuff. I mean, this is all pre-iPhone. This is 2000 when the iPhone came out. What, in 2007?
Yeah.
So.
It's also, they didn't really start spying on it until 2009.
Right,
so.
and it's also like pre-Starbucks and pre...
No, it's not pre-Starbucks.
It's pre-Starbucks in New York.
No, it's not pre-Starbucks in New York.
It's pre them being ubiquitous.
No, No.
There's got to be a coffee shop, like a cart on the street or something.
Listen, New Yorkers love their diners.
You really have to hate your coffee. If you're like, I'm going to go and get it there. Because there's a million places to get coffee.
Those people seem very nice. What are you talking about? Plus, she also was using film, which is so adorable.
Well, you don't know that. I mean, she just didn't have a color printer. Yeah, so they do go to this photomat, right? And the guy there says he doesn't know who she is, or he does, or something like that. So they ask, trying to get a clue. So what do you do with the photos that aren't picked up right away? And, of course, he just thumbs through some
seven envelopes of photos. That
pulls it out, and they're right there. But wait a minute. They make it sound like she's been dead for weeks. And it seems like it was happening the same day. It's like, well, she hasn't picked up her photo. Let's throw it in the dead person pile.
Yeah, he didn't know her name. He didn't know what she looked like, but he was able to pull out the envelope immediately.
Yeah.
There were suspiciously few envelopes in that box as well.
Oh, no, so she was taking a lot of photos, according to those people in the coffee shop, because it sounded like she had new photos like every other day.
Yeah.
But I was like, Photoshop, like, who remembers these? Like, wow. It's like when you see those, like the kids, like, see like a Walkman and they're like, what's that? Like, I mean, and it doesn't seem like this episode should be that long ago, but it was. It's amazing to think that in just that amount of time, we're not even using Photoshops anymore like that.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, Kevin, let's just go out the front porch of our own house and take a photo of
our
ourselves.
Our own crappy, graffiti-ridden house. And so you can see, there's a number 6 behind her head. That narrows it down. It's a framer. Well, we see 2 people before they are famous. Who is playing the role of Paul Donatelli?
He's the voice of the penguins of Madagascar.
That's how you recognize him.
I get Lara.
Wait a minute. Is that...
That's really what you know him from? Really?
No, I don't. I actually looked him up because I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was like, who is this guy? He's got to be somebody. So that's one of his big roles. Mm-hmm.
But the husband?
No, it's not.
The husband you're talking about?
The husband?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not his big role, Lara.
He was in Modern Family?
Yeah, Modern Family for 10 years.
The
Emmy Award winner.
Ty Burrell. The most successful sitcom actor, arguably, since the year 2000.
I was like, he was in Penguins in Madagascar.
On the most successful sitcom TV show of the century. But yeah,
But you also recognize that old detective as the Candlestick from Beauty and the Beast, too,
yeah,
right?
Yes, I did. Yep.
This last month or so, she's called me up on the phone at night, and we've talked, and she's told me how lonely she is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, so before we move on from Ty Burrell, now on Modern Family, when they tell him his ex-wife is dead,
yep,
he starts this awkward sweeping.
That's
like
right.
He's Rain Man.
He continues the grand tradition of doing other things when the murder cops on Law and Order come and tell you that somebody that you love is dead. He continues making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He starts sweeping the floor. He has a lot of dust all of a sudden that needs to be tended to. But yeah, I mean, it's so funny because that you talk about the Ty Burrell thing. It's funny that Lara remembers him from this obscure voiceover role that he did. But as soon as they rang the doorbell in his apartment, you hear his voice. You know it's him.
Is this the home of Stephanie Donatelli?
It's the home of her children and her ex-husband. Why?
His voice really is so distinctive, and his hair in this episode is incredible compared to what it is now.
It's funny because when he does his very sad, I'm trying to not cry because my ex-wife is dead voice, it's essentially the same voice that he does when he's all wound up as Phil Dunphy. Right? It's
Totally. And yeah.
And I will say that when I die, I do not want to be identified by my swatch.
I'll remember that, Kevin.
I do have one quibble with one plot point in this episode. I mean, one. I'm just going to start with this one. So there's this whole conceit that his wife had come out as a lesbian and they were divorced, but they were still good friends and they were co-parents. Why? Like, the fact that she's a lesbian is completely irrelevant in the rest of this episode. The fact that they're divorced is completely irrelevant. He's still fighting for justice as if they were still married.
I think they're just throwing a red herring
It was very weird. That was weird because they framed it weird, too, like her private affairs or her private matters. And what? Oh, you mean because she was like gay? And I'm like, what? It just, the segue there was very, very odd. But he was still, this is when I was like, okay, boohoo broom guy. Like, the boohooing was driving me nuts here.
Well, they are able to deduce that she's gay because she picks up a copy of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Advocate. Oh, she picks up the Gay Advocate? She must be gay. Look, she picked up the Wall Street Journal. She wasn't a stockbroker.
She wasn't a man.
Now, we also have somebody else who's famous. Patrolman number 2. Lara, do you recognize Patrolman number 2?
Nope. Give me a clue, Kevin.
Oh, okay. He's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
That's what I knew him from. That's right. He's a Hey, It's That Guy faux show. What's his name?
It's Joe Latruglio.
All right, lady, calm down. Show us what you're talking about.
And he plays Charles on that sitcom. He's got a very distinctive voice. And, and a baby face.
Yep.
He was a surprise. We do also have a Hey, It's That Guy.
Hey, it's that guy.
Lara, can you recognize the actor who played attorney Axtell?
Is that the defense attorney?
Yeah.
Was he recently in Jack Ryan?
I think he may have been.
Yep. And the OA, the creepy OA on Netflix. I don't know who he is, but he's an angry-looking individual. I'll give him that. I did want to smack him. I did have some rage when he came on. I was like, ah! So, yeah, what else, Kevin?
I'll help you out. That's Jack.
Oh, Guiding Light.
Yeah, he was on Guiding Light.
Jack Gilpin.
Jack Gilpin.
Don't let the political ambitions of a district attorney pervert this court of law.
He's made 7 appearances in the franchise, 5 of them on Law and Order as this lawyer.
Right.
This
He's great
recurring
as
character.
a lawyer.
Yes, but he is only known as Mr. Axtell.
That's right.
They never gave him a first name.
And in real life, he has a famous daughter.
Yeah, who's his famous daughter?
His famous daughter is Betty Gilpin, who was in Glow, the blonde, beautiful wrestler, who's also in Masters of Sex. She's a great actress, and that is his daughter in real life.
Yeah, so I guess the talent runs in the family. I don't see him doing any wrestling moves in this, though.
That's right. But the difference between him and his daughter is I actually know her name. She's sort of transcended that, hey, it's that guy status in a way that I think he is such a classic character actor. You could put him in any situation. He looks like he could be part of a fake president's fake cabinet. He looks like he could be a lawyer. He looks like he could be Rory Gilmore's uncle.
Well, that's why he started as a soap actor. I mean, I feel like soap stars kind of can fill that role. And the hair was it almost didn't look real in this episode to me.
I don't know how they come up sort of with the characteristics of these recurring characters that come on. He was on 5 times. You think they would have moved on and given him a first name? But I think it was because the judge said it so well that it stuck. She went, Mr. Axtell. Okay, so the trail leads them to a stolen credit card, and they know the 2 girls are using it because they are at the movies.
That's right.
So Briscoe and Green decide they're going to go undercover.
Briscoe is just standing casually in the lobby with a giant bag of popcorn.
To blend in
his trench coat.
I thought this was a great scene in part because, these 2 characters, they're pulling each other's hair. They're a funny duo, but they do go and they buy some hoe clothes. It was the first purchase, and then he said, let's wear this shitty stuff, and let's go watch While You Were Sleeping.
Lara, you're a private detective. I mean, you've played that role in very many iterations in your life. Have you ever done any kind of work where you've had to sort of stand around and be undercover just so you can see somebody doing some normal thing like going to the movies?
Sadly not. It's not as exciting. I wasn't following around cheating spouses or anything. But I have had to sit outside of, kind of sketchy apartment buildings waiting for people to come and go and try not to appear obvious.
How do you do that?
Well, I kind of stand out. I have a hard time being not obvious because I'm like, what's going on here? What are these people doing?
Let me pull out my binoculars.
Yeah, exactly. I get my listening ear thing on so I can hear a mile down the street.
I got it for you. This is what you should be doing. You should be smoking a cigarette.
Oh.
Because people standing outside smoking are just like they're doing something. We don't think anything of it. You just standing there with your hands in your pockets
with your earpiece in.
Yeah, unless you're a hooker, people are just going to be like, this person stands out like a sore thumb, even if she does have a box of movie popcorn.
Pretty much. I would stand out if I tried to smoke a cigarette. I just would not look natural doing that. So I think that would be even worse.
Well, you could just like flick it, the ash. It's in there.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's another character in this episode that I really thought Laura might enjoy.
Okay.
And I think you and I are thinking of the same one because I'm just about to talk about the homeless shelter.
Oh, yes. I have an exclamation on this one.
Yeah. So they go looking for the homeless guy named Raffi, and they go to the shelter where he's supposed to be at, and they're met by a man who says he's in charge.
He's under me. I'm the chief administrator here. Oh, we're looking for a certain guest of this establishment. Rafi something? Rafi Lorraine?
Well, how many Raffis you got?
There are 10 beds back on the left.
And he's walking around in his underwear with a beard made out of shaving cream, holding a cat in his arms. What the fuck?
Yeah, that was exactly my reaction. I'm like, wait, what? Why is this guy carrying a cat around? Why is there a cat in the homeless shelter? Why is he totally unconcerned that he's walking around with shaving cream on his face when these people show up?
You thought about why is there a cat in the homeless shelter? The guys.
I mean, is the cat homeless? But homeless cats are typically not that friendly. I'm just saying.
Does the cat need a shave?
I don't know. I was just like, where did this cat come from? And I wanted more information on the cat. That's just me personally.
I just sometimes like they go to a support home or they go to a homeless shelter and they have to have some sort of oddball character that they run into.
Somebody who would take that super shitty job.
Well, yeah, no, but they like run into a patient or a homeless person, and so they come up with some quirks or something, so that's who they are.
This person's off the grid. This person's marginalized.
This is like
maybe it was a therapy cat. I don't know.
No, this one was like unbelievable. Like I've never seen one like this.
No, I've never seen one like this. Like they made a point of making him just look insane for no reason. Like he was supposed to be in charge, though, right?
Well, that's what he says.
I mean, I've been in a lot of those places in my private detective world, and usually it's some old, like I had one guy. It was like he was this old, like angry, veteran guy in the back room, chain smoking cigarettes. Who, it was a little sketchy, but there was no cats there. So cigarettes and like alcohol would have been more true to character, I think. There
is sort of like that gatekeeper part in a lot of these episodes of Law and Order. So this guy was like the gatekeeper, runs the homeless shelter. Very often the gatekeeper is the guy sitting inside the cage at a pawn shop or one of those seedy motels or a parking garage. That person who just isn't helpful.
I don't think he actually was running the homeless shelter, Rebecca. I think he thought he was.
You think he was Gary Buseying the situation?
He totally was. And that shaving cream beard, that was freshly applied.
Yes, it was.
Because if 10 minutes later, it would have been all like sort
Gone?
of, been melting down, and it's a good thing that it wasn't like, oh, you've interrupted me mid-shave.
He was more helpful than the MetroCard guy, though, who actually was supposed to be helping them. The guy with a uniform on sitting in the booth who was just like, sorry, nope. This guy was way more helpful.
Yeah, so by comparison, yes, and much more helpful than the guy at the photomat.
Exactly. Who charged them?
Who charged them $2 or whatever it was.
I should pay. All right, now let's take a look at the second half of this episode. Ryan Gallant's lawyer says his client is clearly insane, but McCoy isn't buying it. He says Gallant has been certified competent when he's taking his meds.
Tell me he's not insane, Jack.
I'll tell you, you're not getting him off based on that. He stole property and ran. And flight's the one indicator juries love to rely on when they reject an insanity defense.
So it doesn't matter whether or not he's insane.
What matters most is he doesn't get to do this again.
They cut a deal. Gallant pleads guilty, easy peasy. But Phil Dunphy's not happy, and that's that it's wrapped up so neatly. Sure, Gallant is responsible, but who's responsible for turning him loose on the public? Because they just can't let shit go. McCoy and Carmichael look into Gallant's medical care. He just got out of Rikers with no medication and never was referred to treatment while in jail. Seems like there's this thing called an HMO that's running things now, and they're trying to save money by not providing care. Communist DA Nora Lewin decides the HMO executive, Philip Andrews, should be tried for manslaughter for not treating Gallant, who later killed Stephanie. The defense argues the executive is just doing his job, fucking people. I mean, saving the prison money on medical expenses. But McCoy says Gallant's violence was a foreseeable event. The jury convicts Andrews on a lesser charge, and he gets a year in jail. All right, Rebecca, I know you want to say something about Abby Carmichael's wardrobe. Go ahead. I won't edit it out.
Okay. Her clothes in this episode.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Now tell me what you think about her character in this episode.
I think she's an uncharacteristically.
Because you love yourself some Carmichael.
I do. I love her because she's a hard-charging DA with a sometimes soft spot underneath that, and she pushes back a lot on Jack's evil deeds when he tries to cross the line. But she, in this episode, is also incredibly kind and empathetic when she's in the room with that incredibly scary, psychotic guy who they know hit somebody, and he comes charging at her.
I understand there's some problem with you letting us fingerprint you. Sir?
He does that every so often.
She just stays like real cool under pressure and kind of in a way that is
her
kind of
eyes
nice.
just open really wide.
Yeah.
She doesn't flinch at all, Lara.
I was impressed.
I thought she was a goner. I was like, oh, here we go. I mean, this guy, this is it. She's done. Her and her pretty outfit, but
DA red shirt.
Yeah, no, I was that was an impressive scene because I thought for sure that guy was gonna like lose it and like one of his other personalities was gonna end up killing her.
This episode was a little bit like a 2018 podcast, like this episode, like this season of Serial, where it sort of took the thing that happened on the surface and dug down to the causes and sort of tried to expose that. Very uncharacteristic for Law and Order. Very uncharacteristic, I think, for a real life DA team to put away a killer and then be like, now let's spend more time looking into the deeper cause and let's send the cops to interview some executives. Like, it's not characteristic of what probably would happen, and definitely uncharacteristic for this usually hard-charging prosecutorial team.
Right. Now, we haven't talked in the podcast yet at all about new District Attorney Nora Lewin.
Kami Pinko, Nora Lewin?
Yeah. Remember, this is just her second episode.
Yeah.
Okay? And she'll be on for 2 years. Yeah. Diane Weist's character. She's the appointed replacement of Adam Schiff, who, we all know is, the longtime... Very disgruntled DA. This has always been a political office, the DA's office.
Right.
But this is probably the first time that in Law & Order we have a political character.
Right, because in the show, as you remember, she was appointed allegedly by Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
Which is really funny to think about now, how he'd point this like soft-hearted footloose mom to be the DA in New York, where he had formerly been a mafia prosecutor.
Oh, yeah, well, she was a mafia prosecutor, too. That's the backstory. That's how they knew each other.
But she's
a tough broad.
She's also a high-thinking law professor type, right?
Yeah.
Who cares a lot about the system.
Yeah, and then Laura, she has this sort of soliloquy where she's talking about the problems with HMOs and how they're big, bad, and evil, and that while this could be a civil case, she wants to go for criminal charges.
If we go in there and start taking pot shots at HMOs, first of all, we're flying in the face of Pegram versus Herdrich. And then secondly, what if we prevail? I mean, what does that do to a healthcare system that depends on HMOs to provide their treatment?
Yeah, that's totally not realistic. But I liked it. I was like behind her. I was like, you go, girl. But I was like, that's never really going to actually happen.
All the Bernie bros were going, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Oh, my God. And then I was like, where do I know her from? She's got a very kind face. But what was she in? Rebecca?
Footloose.
Diane Weist. She's been in a million things, but she was the mom of the preacher's daughter in Footloose, who convinced her hard ass preacher husband to let the kids dance.
There'll be no dancing in this town.
There'll be no HMOs in this town dancing. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
There's this really good scene when they go to arrest the HMO executive.
Which is only the scene only exists for one reason. Let's be real.
Yeah, again, for another quip. He wants
get your commanding officer on the phone. I want to hear from him that I should be arrested.
On your feet, pal. Your coverage doesn't provide for a second opinion.
It's funny because his insurance doesn't cover second opinions either. So at trial, McCoy's argument is that they should have known that turning this guy loose is that he's going to reoffend.
Was not the defendant well aware not only of Mr. Gallant's propensities, but of the risk he constituted for every person he came in contact with? The answer is, of course he was aware of it. Of course, he chose to ignore it. Of course, it was his recklessness that brought about this woman's death.
So by that logic, they could be held accountable for virtually everyone who gets out of prison. I mean, it's one thing to say that this guy, had a medical condition, but I mean, can't you stretch that argument by saying everybody who's committed a crime, when they get out, we should know that recidivism is a worry?
Yes. We could and should.
In the real world, you actually have a safe discharge plan for folks like this. And cases that I worked on, at least you did anyway, they had to report in to whatever halfway house they were going to. They had to set up their, treatment through the community mental health system. And here, this was crazy. They just dumped them in the middle of the road at like midnight. Like, see you later. Good luck.
It wasn't good.
No. It was bad, very bad.
So the bad guy in this episode, well, it turns out to be an HMO executive. The perpetrator is this mentally ill man, Ryan Gallant.
So sad. That whole thing with him on the stand.
Did you ever ask to be examined by a psychiatrist?
I told him I was having trouble with voices. I told him it was keeping me up nights. My bad uncle, my good uncle, saying about bringing the car down from Yonkers. I said, I ain't bringing no car down from Yonkers. That's right.
He was like a zombie. It was the saddest, you've seen him attack Abby Carmichael. You know that he, out of nowhere, hit this lady over the head with a brick or whatever, and you know that he has serious problems. But it was just so incredibly sad. And the other thing I kept thinking was, he was clearly heavily medicated on the stand. He clearly has all of these issues. Wouldn't he also be impeached as a witness by that awesome corporate lawyer? Like, how did he even get to testify in this trial?
Yeah, I was kind of taken aback by the fact that nobody seemed at all concerned about the fact that he was pretty much comatose, but somehow standing upright because he was so heavily medicated. I'm like, nobody even seemed to say anything about it. Oh, he's fine now. Look at him. No, he's not. Yeah. He's about to pass out from medication. And I, one of the things that they often ask you, when you're going in to testify, they'll be like, have you used drugs in the last 24 hours? Clearly he had, but that did not enter the equation here. So, I mean, that's kind of like a common standard practice that judges employ when there's somebody taking the stand that comes from, are you sober? No.
A huge missing piece to this episode is an episode about psychiatric care, and we saw none of our favorite psychiatrists from Law & Order in this episode. Where was Olivet this whole time? Where was she?
Where was Skoda?
Where was Skoda? Exactly.
I think they were
working for the PPO.
They're working for the PPO. They do get the conviction that they're hoping for at the end. You know what they did is important because they're going to be on TV.
Dateline wants to interview me about the verdict.
Jane Pauley or Stone Phillips?
Stone Phillips.
Diane Wiest is going to be on TV. She's going to get to go give her press conference on the older, classier iteration of Dateline before it was a true crime show when it had Jane Pauley and Stone Phillips. And apparently being interviewed by Stone Phillips was better than being interviewed by Jane Pauley in a super sexist turn of events.
Lara, weigh in on that. Jane Pauley or Stone Phillips?
Well, I mean, Stone Phillips is pretty handsome and all, but, and I can see why she wanted to be interviewed by him. But, we got to go for Jane Pauley.
There was no Keith Morrison.
We got to have some
time?
girl power. No Keith Morrison. Oh, my God. I know.
Leaning on things.
Remember how Jane Pauley had that cowlick bang situation? Like always. I always just wanted to reach into the TV and just smooth it down.
Fix it.
Lick my finger and smooth it down. Sorry, Jane. But it was a problem. It was a real problem.
Yeah, it really hampered her career as a broadcaster.
Can we talk about how the guy on trial, the medical guy, he was so evil looking. He looked like an extra evil version of Kyle MacLachlan. So evil. He had the evil eyes.
He was kind of greasy.
Yes.
So good casting, or?
Yeah. Yes, because he made me angry.
Totally. And I also loved the guy who played the beleaguered HMO doctor who had to work in the prison. He was so broken.
Andrews fired a doctor for making too many referrals. Same day he calls me in. He asked me if I heard about the firing and if I was familiar with SMJ's policy limiting referrals. He told me he hoped I didn't make the same mistake.
Yeah, and I think that while this is set up in a prison setting, you got to remember the time, 2000, so we've just been through the 90s where you had this HMO, PPO revolution in the way insurance companies are giving you your care. It seems like even though this is taking place in prison where they would have some authority, these characters, it's really a substitute for everybody's personal health insurance, and that everybody in the audience kind of knows that they're afraid that their doctor isn't going to be able to do what they want them to do because some insurance executive is going to tell them no.
Right. I mean, this is what's really was funny to me about this is that the argument around the healthcare and the sort of the rise of the managed care HMO thing back then, you heard the same arguments then about the privatization of it and that corporate conglomeration as you hear now about potentially more like government intervention in healthcare. Back then, it was like, you are not going to be able to make your own decisions. There's going to be people deciding if you live or die. And I'm like, hello, death panel debate. It's like basically the same debate. Basically, just because healthcare itself is just so expensive and completely sucks in this country.
Yeah, and it's also the same in the jail system, which is kind of sad because this was 18 years ago.
Yep.
And when I was still doing defense work and going into jails and working with the public defender system, there was one of our jails in the state that was having people come in that needed psych meds, and they were not giving them psych meds or medicines that they needed, and they were having some pretty serious situations. And I'm like, okay, so how many years later is that? And that is actually still happening in the real world.
Yep.
Now, it's interesting, instead of wishing this guy would get his comeuppance by being raped in prison, which is
what they usually do.
Which is what they kind of
It's
usually
their
hint at.
go-to, yes.
Yeah.
How much time will Andrew serve with good behavior?
Under a year.
He'll serve it at Rikers. Let's hope he has a good immune system.
They hope instead he gets sick and has to get medical care in the jail that he was in charge of.
Oh, Schadenfreude, right?
Yeah.
Let's hope he has a good immune system. Wasn't that the...
Yeah. But, I mean, we all know he's going to get raped and have to go to the hospital
Probably,
there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Pretty
in the Law
much.
and Order universe, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oof.
This is the last sort of dangling plot point for me. They never found the swatch. Well, let's take a look at the real-life story that inspired this episode. It's time for Ripped from the Headlines.
You think you know who did it. You think you know who did it. But you don't know who did it. You don't know who did it. Ripped from the headlines.
This episode is inspired by the shocking death of Kendra Webdale, who was pushed in front of a subway train in 1999. The 32-year-old Webdale moved to New York City with dreams of becoming a writer, but made ends meet working in an office. One day in January 1999, she entered the 23rd Street station on her way to work when she crossed paths with Andrew Goldstein. The 29-year-old had a history of violent schizophrenia and had been hospitalized 13 times. Goldstein had left treatment 4 weeks previous and hadn't been taking his medication. While on the subway platform, he approached Webdale and told her he didn't know why he was doing this, and then he shoved her in the path of the oncoming N train. The story horrified New Yorkers and inspired a series of mental health reforms. These include the creation of Kendra's Law. It allows courts to order seriously mentally ill people into outpatient treatment. Today, 46 states have some form of assisted outpatient treatment. This past September, Andrew Goldstein was released after 19 years in prison.
Wow.
Well, the story in the subway, pretty scary stuff. Should millions of commuters be overly concerned?
I think that the whole situation, I mean, it's funny when you go to the airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have, if you're like in some big airport, you have to take one of those shuttles from one terminal to the other and the train comes. There's like a wall between you and the train that like opens up when the train arrives.
Yeah.
So it's like not possible to jump on the tracks. You can't even have access to the tracks. And if you look at the way the New York City subway system is built, it's actually surprising that this isn't a way people murder people all the time. It's so easy. There are so many people.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's.
The President of the United States did it in House of Cards.
I gotta say, the reform I would be looking for would be, can we put up some sort of little fence between this platform and this stupid track?
I know. I'm more concerned about, like, I have a fear of getting shut in those automatic doors that open and close on those airport subways. I'm always like,
your arm will be hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was 5, I remember this is like one of these traumatic childhood memories. I got like stuck in the middle of one of those automatic doors that opens and shuts, and I was like, ah! So now anytime I get on and off one of those, I'm like, oh, this is going to be the day. Oh my God.
It's like the croc in the escalator nightmare scenario, right?
Yeah.
So the push for Kendra's Law in New York, which benefits patients like Goldstein, was championed by Webdale's family.
Good for them.
Yeah, surprised by that?
Yeah, actually, it's nice. It's nice to hear that for once, I mean, the story I think we're so used to hearing is that families of victims are used to as tools by the DAs and elected officials to enact tougher laws, to take away the rights of potential defendants, to not look out for the actual health and well-being of citizens. I think it's great that this family stepped up and did that. Good for them. Absolutely.
And I think, when I was talking about, cases I've worked on where people are discharged, I think that's post this law going into effect. Because it's something they definitely, people don't always follow it. You can't force people to comply, but it is something that is used, which is, helpful.
Assisted outpatient treatment programs have the support of nearly all the major medical associations. They all agree that it provides for better outcomes for the patients. And a 2009 study shows that it's reduced psychiatric hospitalizations and arrests by a significant amount. The New York Civil Liberties Union is the most vocal opponent to the practice. They say it infringes on the patient's civil rights. Do they have a point?
Yeah. They also have a point. That's the thing. That's what's so tricky about this, right? You have the safety of the public and the rights of individual people. And that is where these lines are the hardest to draw. If you look at all sorts of criminal justice reform, a lot of it is well-intentioned efforts to keep people safer or to improve the perception of safety. You look at laws like Marcy's Law sort of passing around the country and so forth. But at the same time, these laws do take away the rights of defendants to live as independent people, to be presumed innocent when they are in front of in front of courts and at hearings and so forth. So yeah, they have a point too. It's not a great solution. I think the real solution here is just to have better health care in the country, which is a much bigger problem.
Yeah. And the other thing is, a lot of times this is built into a condition of parole or probation that the person needs to be drug and alcohol free or go. Sometimes they build that right into the sentencing guidelines. So that's also another way they get that out there.
So just a couple of weeks ago, Andrew Goldstein was released. The New York Times said it was unclear whether he could be transitioned into a Kendra's Law program because part of the requirements is you have to have not been compliant with your treatment. Which, I think that's a very ironic footnote.
It is. So there's no monitoring for people who have just, agree, if they're in prison and they sort of agree to take their drugs and do their treatment, then they don't get monitored when they get released?
Well, isn't that the point? We want them to do that.
Yes.
This is to help people who have a hard time doing that.
Right.
So, I guess it hasn't been reported that he has had, I don't know what you call a relapse or that he...
Someone should just check on that guy and make sure he's okay.
I think that's one very important symbol of the program that, you don't want him messing up.
Right.
Well, that is going to do it for us. We want to thank our guest, Lara Bricker. Lara, where can our listeners follow you online?
At Lara Bricker on Twitter.
And Rebecca Lavoie, how can our listeners follow you?
At Reb Lavoie on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can track me on Twitter at Kevin P. Flynn. You can also tweet to us at Law and Order Pod or follow us on Instagram at These Are Their Stories Podcast. Our newsreader was Cy Frater. Our theme music was composed and performed by Uncanny Valleys. Line editing by Henry Lavoie. Content assistance from Travis Roy. Lily Flynn handles promotions. To get ad-free episodes of These Are Their Stories a week early, sign up for Stitcher Premium. You can get your first month free at StitcherPremium.com/crime. All clips in this podcast were used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exemption for criticism and commentary. If you want to know what episodes we're talking about in our upcoming shows, go to lawandorderpodcast.com. Sign up for our newsletter for a chance to be our next Law and Order Marathon winner. These Are Their Stories was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio and is a production of Partners in Crime Media.
Partners in Crime Media.